Before we get into the deep dive games, I just kind of go over some quick overview games that I saw. Starting with the Texans Browns game, the Browns lost. Excuse me, the Browns beat the Texans 7-10. Close game between the two. A lot of it had to do with the thunderstorm with the windy conditions. The Cardinals beat the Bills. As some of you may know, Cardinals beat the Bills in a really fashionable way. Kyler Murray had a Hail Mary touchdown to D Hop. I also watched the Rams game against the Seattle Seahawks. Russ had a bad game, but that's okay. He's got plenty of opportunities to make his case for an MVP. And then I watched the Packers game. The Packers beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, and rookie quarterback Jake Luton had a pretty decent start against the Packers. I mean, Packers are not an easy team to start against. But their defense had a good run on Aaron Jones, the running back for the Packers. Packers need to have a couple more adjustments, but I'm glad to see what's going to happen more for both teams. So let's kind of get rolling through the three games that we want to talk about, starting with the Colts at the Titans game. So I'll kind of start things off my first thoughts. It's very obvious to me watching that game that Titans kind of have a couple defensive things to work on, especially on special teams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can recall a block kick for a scoop and score.
Yep.
But I like Ryan Tannehill as a quarterback, man. He's just like a very likable dude, just because he had that ACL injury, and then he kind of come back for redemption, leaving Miami, and then being a great fit for the Titans.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what are kind of some thoughts you noticed from that game?
I mean, yeah, like you said, Tannehill's a good quarterback, and really, the Colts, they know how to come back in games. As you saw, they were down, I think, 2 scores going into halftime, and as a Bengals fan, I know being up 21-0 in the first half against them didn't hold up, and they're a really good team, and I think that division is going to come obviously down to those two teams, with the Texans and the Jags being pretty much irrelevant. But the Titans are kind of a frustrating team to understand, because I mean, you look back and week 2 they only beat Jacksonville by 3 points, and then they played Buffalo in week 4 and I think beat them by 2 or 3 scores, and then they lose to the Bengals. So it's like you don't really know what team you're going to get week in and week out. And,
Right.
It must be frustrating as a Titans fan, but I know Mike Vrabel's a good coach, but the way it's trending is it looks like it might be Indy's division, but we'll see if the Titans can get together with Derek Henry and everybody.
And I really liked this matchup. It was kind of like a match of who was going to take over the division.
Right.
And I kind of jumped to Philip Rivers. I mean, people joke that he's like old man Rivers. He's kind of, not overrated, but he's just never made that next step. I mean, I don't believe he's never gotten past. He's never been to a Super Bowl for starters. Right. And you have his counterparts like Big Ben and Eli Manning, where they've at least won one Super Bowl. And I don't know, I'll give Philip Rivers a pat on the back. He had a pretty decent game. I mean, he had no picks, 300-plus yards, and a TD. And, Philip Rivers he's always just been a good quarterback. But one thing that stuck out to me is I noticed this game is, have you ever seen him throw the football?
He's got a funky
It's
three-quarter.
I can't even mimic. I can't make fun because I can't actually do the throw.
Yeah. It's definitely a little off-putting, and it varies time to time. But and that's the thing with Philip Rivers and kind of how he was in San Diego or L.A. now, is that even the Colts offense is so you don't know where you're going to get the points from. You don't know where whether you're going to get a running attack or which running back it's going to be. This week it was Nyheim Hines, and I had him benched in fantasy, and I think he had 21.5 or something like that. So it's one of those teams, like you look back at the proverbial New England Patriots running backs or the Denver Broncos running backs who fantasy or not, you just don't know what you're going to get week in and week out. So.
Yeah, they kind of have that three-way running back system that's very popular with the New England Patriots. You mentioned, because one running back I've been following closely since college was Wisconsin's Jonathan Taylor. I mean, I loved him in college, and honestly, I don't know if it's maybe he's not in the right system, but I just haven't seen much from this season, because I even tried to pick one in fantasy. I almost begged this guy on my league, please give me Jonathan Taylor. I'll give you anything.
Oh,
but I'm glad I didn't glad I didn't fall through with that.
No, I tried getting him a couple of times, and he ended up going. I had a lot of late picks to where there was a lot of picks in between, and like I said, I mean, I picked up Nyheim Hines about a month ago, and he's either going to get you 5 points or 20, and you can't really depend on that because that's just how their offense is. But they definitely, like you said, it was a matchup between two of the teams that was kind of going to determine how the AFC South is going to go from here. And it looks like the Colts are in the driver's seat, but still plenty of time left.
Yeah, and another shout out to Michael Pittman Jr. had a pretty good game as a
Yeah,
receiver.
He did.
Um,
USC.
yeah, I mean, let's kind of jump through to the Chargers at Dolphins game. I was real excited for this game because it's against two first-round rookies. Tua, I always mispronounce his name. Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
Tua Tagovailoa. Viola, that's right. Yeah, Viola.
I know. I used to practice it when I thought the Bengals were going to pick him, but then Burrow came out of nowhere, so I kind of think I lost it. But
right.
Tagovailoa.
Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
Tagovailoa. It's Tua Tagovailoa. I will remember this, and I will say it right from now on.
We'll forget it next
But yes, Tua versus Justin Herbert, who was the third quarterback picked. He got selected by the Chargers. Tua got selected by the Dolphins. And, look at the first half. It was a pretty even matchup, not just between the two quarterbacks, but just the teams in general, especially on defense. But Chargers were just a little bit on the defensive edge before halftime. And, last half, Tua turned up. I mean, it was just he was just getting better and better each game I've seen him play.
And I don't want to say that he's a game manager because that's not putting enough respect on his name. He's way more than that. But the way that the Dolphins are, I mean, they've got great corners and Byron Jones and who's the other guy, Xavier Howard. They lock down the receivers. They send different blitzes. They force turnovers. I think they have a turnover force in 16 straight games, which is obviously the highest streak in the NFL right now, which, I mean, you don't have to be, Joe Burrow, we'll get to this later, but Joe Burrow's had to, overcome a terrible defense, a terrible offensive line, whatever the week is, it's something different every time. But, if you've got a defense like the Dolphins do and Tua can, just, you don't have to be a game manager per se, but just, don't limit the mistakes. And, if your defense is going to force mistakes on the other end, then, that's a pretty good recipe. And what are they, 6-3 now? I mean, Dolphins they're legit. And
yeah, it's very true. And it's just one thing I noticed is Browns are kind of the same record. I think it's so weird to think that 3 years ago Browns weren't even a thought in anyone's mind.
And the Bengals are 2-6-1, so that's at
that's
least some
better,
normalcy.
that's better in comparison to last year, isn't it? In the same weeks,
we have the same amount of wins.
I mean, you never know. I mean, I've seen improvements from all those teams, and kind of get back to the Chargers Dolphins game is one thing I like about the Dolphins with Tua is that it's almost like the Dolphins have always almost been there. I mean, if you look at recent games before Tua, it was always a close one drive game or one touchdown game away from winning. It was almost they just need that little extra hump, and I'm starting to finally see that. And Justin Herbert, I mean, I like Justin Herbert, and fortunately he had that pick, and he just can't make mistakes like that, especially close moments like this game. But I'm excited to see both these quarterbacks kind of progress throughout this season and in the future because Burrow, Herbert, Tua, Kyler Murray, and much more. They're the future of the NFL,
Allen,
no doubt about it. I mean, quarterbacks are becoming a lot better over the years,
for sure.
Especially in efficiency. They have various styles. They have styles that they minimize turnovers. And they try to, they have higher QBRs compared to their previous generations, such as the Phillip Rivers, Big Bens, and Eli Mannings. Because those guys just do picks left and right. It wasn't a big deal.
The league's in good hands for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, seeing the top three quarterbacks all do well in their own, perspectives it's definitely good to see because, it's always good because you see Ben's still, cooking along, but Eli's retired and Rivers is definitely on his last leg. So. It's good to see that these, and Tom Brady's just outlasting everybody, but it's good to see a new wave of these quarterbacks and Russ is obviously kind of in between there, but he's, Russ is always going to be Russ. He's, year in, year out, but
exactly.
It's good to see.
Now let's get to the juicy stuff. I know Trevor's been waiting for this. Let's talk about the Bengals at Steelers game. I'm sure this is kind of he's excited to talk about it, but at the same time he's probably a little bummed to talk about it. So as you know, the Steelers beat the Bengals on Sunday night, and kind of my thoughts that I saw was a lot of drop passes in the first half, but I do give the Bengals credit for containing James Conner on the run game. But it's just unfair because Big Ben has such an arsenal of receivers, and that's kind of been their thing because you had Antonio Brown for a while, you had Le'Veon Bell, who was the running back. But either way, Big Ben just had a much more experienced receivers compared to the Bengals and Joe Burrow. But yeah, let me hear your thoughts on the game.
Well, I mean, so it's, like you said, they have the weapons, and we actually were down to, we have had so many injuries and so many, we were down 4 coaches due to COVID protocols. And, this isn't a prelude to, make excuses, but this was one thing that worried me, leading up to the game was that, we were down to, at the beginning of the year, we had a number 7 cornerback on our practice squad. He was in the game getting significant time both in the slot and on the outside. And, you look at a lineup of receivers like Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, even Eric Ebron had a couple big catches. I mean, you're already underwhelmingly or overwhelmingly outmatched there.
Right.
And that really wasn't the deciding factor in the game. I mean, the score 36-10 looks like the Steelers won it handedly, and they did. And it was actually, if you look at the game from the 3 phases, I really think the score could have been a lot worse, especially if you break down that first quarter. I mean, we had 2 fumbles, a fumble on the return by Alex Erickson, a fumble on a first down catch that was actually a momentum killer and a drive killer by T. Higgins.
Right.
And I think out of those 2 turnovers, they ended up with 3 points.
Right.
The Steelers had 6 possessions offensively in the first quarter, which usually in an NFL game you're looking at 9, 10, 11 offensive possessions. They had 6 in the first quarter.
Right.
And the defense did hold them to, I want to say it was 12 points before, because I don't think they started scoring into the second. But you're asking your defense to do too much, and we were 0 for 13 on third downs, which I haven't looked into the stats, but I can guarantee you there are not that many teams, if any at all, who've ever gone 0 for on third down and won a game.
Right.
I mean, and even Joe Burrow, he looked off. I mean, it was windy, super windy to start the game, first quarter. Ben didn't have an issue with it. Speaks to his experience and probably being familiar with, Heinz Field.
Yeah.
But, Burrow started off 1 for 5. They had a bunch of 3 and outs. I mean, he didn't look sharp, and he started to pick it up in the second quarter, but then he got that hit by Bud Dupree that was maybe a late hit, but it wasn't too bad, and he kind of toppled into the bench there on the sidelines, and he came out in the second half, and
right.
He just looked off. I mean, I think it was I would say his worst game that he's played in, at least on his end, because he had a really bad game against the Ravens earlier in the year, but they were hitting him hard.
Right, that's the thing. Ravens are known to be a top 5 defense in the league, and it's no doubt that Steelers are top 5. I could argue maybe top 3. I mean, they're just defensively solid, and you can't be too hard on Burrow if you're a fan or not, just because it's hard to go against teams that are that experienced and that well conditioned.
Yeah.
And I mean, Burrow obviously had an off day, but here's the thing I noticed about Burrow is that he doesn't make the same mistakes twice. No. He is, he plays like he's a second year. That's what it looks like to me.
If not more, yeah. He's,
right.
And that's one thing that we'll get to it a little bit too, but I don't know if anybody. I'm sure at that point most people were tuned out of that game, but. It was kind of controversial that they left him in at the end of the game down, 36-10, and they had asked Joe Burrow after the game if he had any conversations with the head coach Zach Taylor, and he goes, nope, never came up. He goes, I'm not a quitter, and it's as a fan of a team with a bad offensive line and a future franchise quarterback, you would kind of like to see him come out in that situation, but it sounds like he that was never on the table. He wanted to finish what he started, and
right.
It's a little scary for a fan and for I'm sure the team and organization in general. But
right.
I think that we'll get to this, but his attitude and his personality, I think, rubs off on his team. Which
right. And I definitely want to get more into the more traits of Joe Burrow that I see on the field and off the field. So let's kind of take a quick break, just because my camera's really shitty and it's probably going to die any minute. Just kind of, just quick break, and then we'll get talking about what we're seeing in Joe Burrow's rookie career and what we're going to see in the future. So stick around, guys, and we'll have some more.